My name is Leah Thornton. I am 33 years old. I am a certified public accountant at a mid-size firm in Dallas, Texas, where I have worked for the past 7 years specializing in corporate tax compliance. I spend my professional days doing one specific thing: building an accurate record of what actually happened, numerically, so that no one can later claim it happened differently. I find discrepancies. I trace transactions. I match what was reported against what was real. It is exacting work, and I am good at it, and I chose it because I have always been someone who believes that the truth, properly documented, is the most durable thing in the world. I am telling you this because this story is about a discrepancy, a very significant one, a 3-year gap between what my husband told me was happening and what was actually happening. Between the version of events he presented to my face and the version he was building behind my back. Between the man he performed for me in our marriage and the man he was in a group chat with his family. I find discrepancies for a living. I should have found this one faster. I have made peace with the fact that I didn't, because the particular kind of discrepancy I am describing, the person building the false record, is the person you trust completely, the person who sleeps in your bed and knows your fears and holds your hand at your father's funeral. That kind of discrepancy is not found the way accounting errors are found. It is found when someone on the outside hands you a screenshot and says, "You need to see this." My husband, Marcus Thornton, is 36 years old. We met when I was 27 and he was 30, at a continuing education conference in Dallas that we had both been sent to by our respective employers and that we had both been quietly dreading, and which turned out to contain, in addition to the expected dull seminars, the person I would spend the next 6 years of my life believing was entirely on my side. He told me I was imagining things. He told me that the coldness I felt from his family was not real, that I was reading into things, that his mother simply reserved and his sisters simply busy, and that none of the ways the Thornton family made me feel invisible and small and peripheral were intentional or meaningful, and that I was, this is the word he used more than once, oversensitive. This is the story of how I found out, and what I did about it, and what it gave me back. Let me take you to the beginning, to Dallas and to a conference room and a man named Marcus Thornton, who was, on the day I met him, exactly what he appeared to be. The trouble with people who are skilled at appearing is that they can maintain the appearance for a very long time. Marcus Thornton was, when I met him at 27, a genuinely attractive person to be around. I want to give him that in full and without reservation, because understanding this story requires understanding that I was not a naive person who fell for an obvious bad actor. I was a careful, observant, professionally analytical woman who fell in love with someone who was, in the ways that were visible, a good man, a warm man, an attentive man. He was 30 years old at the time, working as a project manager for a commercial real estate firm in Dallas. He was tall and put together in the easy way of someone who didn't try too hard. Good clothes that fit well. A watch he'd bought himself when he got his first real job that he still wore every day, the kind of unpretentious, quiet confidence that I find, and have always found, more attractive than any louder version of itself. He had a sense of humor that was dry and specific, and that required you to be paying attention to appreciate it, which I was. We met on the second morning of the conference, over coffee in the hotel lobby, that was demonstrably worse than either of us would have made at home. And he made a comment about the coffee that was funny in the specific way I am describing, and I laughed and we talked for 45 minutes before either of us remembered there were seminars to attend. He asked for my number before he went. I gave it. We dated for 2 years before we got engaged. Those 2 years were what I would describe, honestly, and without the revisionist bitterness of retrospect, as genuinely good. He was present. He was consistent. He showed up when he said he would, and called when he said he would, and listened in the specific way that I had, by 27, become good at distinguishing from performed listening, the kind where someone is waiting for you to stop talking so they can respond, versus the kind where they are actually what you're saying. Marcus was actually listening. He was also, from the first time he introduced me to his family, navigating a situation I did not fully understand. I want to say that carefully, because I have thought about this a great deal. I do not believe that Marcus's behavior was entirely premeditated from the beginning. I do not believe he looked at me that hotel lobby, thought, I will show this woman exactly what she wants to see. What I believe is that Marcus was, from early in our relationship, caught between two things: his genuine feelings for me and his family's response to me, and that he made of seriousness in how to manage that were individually understandable in the way that small acts of cowardice are understandable, and that accumulated over time into something was not understandable at all. The first choice was to not tell me the full truth about his family's reaction to me. The second choice was to tell me I was imagining things when I noticed their coldness. The third choice was to join the conversation that was happening about me behind my back. Each choice made the next one more likely. Each choice made the one before it harder to undo. By the time I'm the group chat, Marcus had been making these choices for 2 years and had built something that could not be dismantled with a conversation. It could only be confronted. The Thornton family is based in Fort Worth, about 35 minutes from our apartment in Dallas. Marcus's mother, Ruth Thornton, is 61 years old. She is a retired high school English teacher who has been the undisputed center of the Thornton family system for as long as anyone in it can remember. She is a small woman with a precise manner and excellent posture, and the specific quality of someone who has spent her life in classrooms. She is always evaluating, always grading. You feel it when you are in the room with her, the sense that your performance is being assessed against a standard she has not disclosed. She is not rude to me. I want to establish that clearly, because the thing I am describing is not rudeness. It is something more sophisticated and more difficult to document. She is polite. She uses my name. She asks questions about my work, what appears to be genuine interest. She remembers my preferences. Usually, she knows I don't eat pork. She knows I take my coffee black. On the observable surface, Ruth Thornton is an attentive hostess. But there is a temperature in the room when I am in it that is different from the temperature when I am not. I know this because Marcus has a habit of describing Thornton family gatherings to me after the fact in terms that do not match the gatherings I attended. Events I found tense and navigated carefully, he described as relaxed and easy. Interactions that left me feeling subtly dismissed, he characterized as warm. And when I pointed to between his description and my experience, he pointed to me. You're reading too much into it. You're too sensitive. The Thorntons are just different from your family. His sisters, Diane, 38, and Karen, 34, share their mother's manner in diluted form. They are both married with children. They are both in their own homes and social contexts, apparently warm and funny and easy to be around. In gatherings that include me, they are pleasant in the specific way of people who have agreed to be pleasant, and are maintaining that agreement with moderate effort. The warmth they have in other contexts does not seem to extend to the room I am in. I noticed this from the first family dinner Marcus took me to, 8 months into our relationship. We drove to Fort Worth on a Saturday in spring and Ruth made a roast, and there were 9 of us around the table, and everyone was perfectly pleasant, and I drove home feeling, for a reason I could not entirely name, like I had been assessed and not quite passed. Like something about me had been found insufficient in a rubric I hadn't given. I told Marcus this. He said, "They loved you. My mom said you were lovely." I said, "That's not what I'm describing." He said, "I think you're reading into Leah. My family isn't very expressive. It doesn't mean anything." I filed this away. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I went to the next gathering and the one after that, trying each time to understand the room better, to navigate it more effectively, to find the version of myself that would register differently in the Thornton family's assessment. I adjusted my behavior. I asked more questions and offered fewer opinions. I was warmer at arrivals and more measured in conversation. I tried. The temperature in the room did not change. What changed over the course of 2 years of dating and 3 years of marriage was my understanding of what the temperature meant. Not immediately. I did not arrive at understanding quickly. I arrived at it the way you arrive at most important understandings, slowly, in pieces, each new piece making the previous ones cohere until the full picture was unavoidable. The full picture was this. Ruth Thornton had decided, early and firmly, and without the kind of flexibility that would have allowed new evidence to change the conclusion, that I was not the right person for her son. This decision was not based on anything I had done. It was based, as far as I can determine, on a combination of factors that I will describe. I was not from Fort Worth. I was not from a family the Thorntons knew. I was professionally ambitious in a way I had not been and did not entirely trust. And I was, in ways I cannot specify but that I believe are real, different from the kind of woman Ruth had imagined for Marcus. Marcus and I married 3 years ago, in a ceremony at a venue in uptown Dallas that was exactly what I had wanted. Small, specific, intentional. 60 guests. My family from Memphis, his family from Fort Worth. A jazz quartet during dinner, the specific warmth of a wedding that the two people in it rather than a performance for an audience. Ruth Thornton attended. She wore a champagne-colored dress, and she was gracious, and she danced with Marcus during the father-son, mother-son dance, and she cried during Marcus's toast, which was moving and specific and everything a wedding toast should be. She hugged me at the end of the evening and said, "Welcome to the family." She said it looking at me with the expression she always had, pleasant, evaluating, giving nothing beyond the surface. I said thank you. I meant it. I was genuinely trying to feel welcomed. The first year of marriage was the year I stopped trying to explain the temperature in the room and started simply managing it. I made a calculation, the kind a CPA makes when a number doesn't add up but the error can't be located. Set aside, keep running the columns, come back to it when more data is available. I set aside the question of whether the Thornton family's coolness, deliberate and focused on the marriage, which was in our own apartment and at our own day life, genuinely good. Marcus was as a good husband in the practical sense. He was present, he was helpful, he was consistent. We had built a life together that worked. Shared routines, shared finances managed with the careful attention of 2 financially literate people, shared friends, shared ambitions. I was happy in the marriage, in the way that you are happy, when the foundation is solid, even if some of the weather above it is difficult. specific, recurring moments that I want to give you so you understand what the texture of those 3 years was like. The Thornton family had a group trip every summer. The year we got married, Ruth sent a group text about the summer trip, dates, destination, logistics. The text went to every Thornton family member. I was not on the thread. Marcus was. He mentioned it at dinner and I said, "I didn't get the text." "I think she just started a new thread. I'll make sure you're added." He did not make sure I was added. I found out about the final plans from Diane in passing at a family dinner 6 weeks before the trip. I told Marcus I hadn't been included in the planning. He said, "My mom is just bad at group texts. It's not personal." At Christmas, Ruth had put together Christmas stockings for every member of the family, personalized, name embroidered, hung a mantle at her house for the Christmas morning gathering. There was one for Marcus, one for Diane and her husband, one for Karen and her husband, one for each of the grandchildren. There was not one for me. I pointed this out to Marcus quietly when no one was standing nearby. He said, "She probably just forgot. She's getting older." He got Ruth and asked her about it discreetly. Ruth said, "Oh, I didn't know if Leah would want one. I didn't want to presume." She then said she would make one for next year. She did not make one for next year. At a Thornton family dinner in the 2nd year of our marriage, I made a comment, a minor observation about a film we had all seen, nothing controversial, the kind of thing you say at a table when the conversation is easy. And Diane responded in a way that was not overly unkind, but had the specific quality of someone redirecting a conversation away from a speaker they have collectively decided is not interesting. The table moved with her. Marcus, beside me, said nothing. Later at home, I told him what I had felt. He said, "I think you're reading into it, Leah. Diane is just like that. She doesn't mean anything by it." I told him about the stocking. He said his mother had just forgotten. I told him about the group text. He said she was bad at technology. I told him that I consistently felt, in Thornton family gatherings, like I was being managed rather than included. He said, "I think you come in with an expectation that things will be bad and they pick up on that. You might be creating some of what you're experiencing." I need to tell you about the things I told Marcus, because the group chat was not simply Marcus agreeing with his characterization of me. It was Marcus providing them with ammunition, sharing private information that I had given him in the context of complete trust, and watching them use it to build the case against me that he was simultaneously denying existed. When you are married, you tell your spouse things. You tell them about your fears and your frustrations and your difficult days and the specific vulnerabilities that you carry from your past. You do this because marriage is the relationship where you are supposed to be able to put down the performance and be the actual person. You are supposed to be able to say, "Here is the thing I am afraid of," and trust that the person you are saying it to will hold it with care. I told Marcus things, specific things, private things. I told him that I had felt, growing up, like I was never quite enough for my father, that my father was a demanding man whose approval operated like a goalpost that moved each time I reached it, and that I had spent a significant portion of my 20s understanding that pattern and releasing myself from it. This was not a casual disclosure. This was the kind of thing you tell a person when you trust them with your history. He told his family I was needy and desperate for approval, and that it explained why I was so clingy with him and so oversensitive about his mom. I told him that I sometimes felt, in professional settings, that I had to work twice as hard as my colleagues to be taken half as seriously, and that this was a real and tiring experience that I was navigating with care. I told him this in the context of a conversation about a difficult week at the firm. He told his family I was always playing the victim at work and exhausting to be around when things don't go perfectly. I told him about a former relationship, a relationship that had ended badly because the man involved had been consistently dismissive of my opinions and had, in ways I had only understood in retrospect, made me feel systematically less confident in my own judgment over the course of 2 years. I told him this because he had asked, because we were building the kind of intimacy where histories are shared, because I trusted him. He told his family I had baggage and that it was wearing him out. I want you to sit with this for a moment, because what Marcus was doing was not simply agreeing with his family's impression of me. He was actively building the case. He was taking the things I gave him in the most private moments of our marriage and handing them to a group of people who had already decided not to like me, to be used evidence that their decision was correct. He was performing support to my face while building a case against me behind it. When I think about this now, and I think about it less than I used to, which is its own form of progress, what I return to is not the anger, though the anger was real and was warranted. What I return to is a specific kind of grief, the grief of understanding that the person who held the most private version of you was handling it carelessly, was handing it to people who did not care for it, was treating the things you trusted him was material for a conversation about why you were too much. I gave him the things I was most afraid to show. He shared them in a group chat. My best friend, Jessica Cole, has been my best friend since we were both 24 years old and ended up in adjacent cubicles, an accounting firm, where neither of us stayed long but where we found each other, which was the relevant outcome. Jessica is 33, like me, and she is a project manager now at a logistics company in Dallas. And she is the kind of person whose friendship I have spent 9 years being grateful for, specific and direct and funny, and completely without the particular social dishonesty that makes some friendships more comfortable but less useful. Jessica did not like Marcus. I want to be honest about this because it matters for the story, and because I want you to understand the specific bind that puts a person in when their best friend has reservations about their partner. Jessica never said outright, "I don't like him." She was too smart for that, too aware that a direct statement of that kind would accomplish nothing except distance between us. What she did was ask careful questions. How does that make you feel when he says that? What did you say when he told you his family wasn't being cold? Have you talked to anyone outside the marriage about any of this? I said yes to that last one. I had talked to her. She said, "I mean a therapist, Leah. I started seeing a therapist in our 2nd year of marriage. Dr. Patricia Webb, who has an office in Lakewood, and who has, over the course of 2 years, helped me understand a number of things about myself and my patterns and the specific ways that my history with my father made me susceptible to relationships where my own perception was systematically undermined." I told Marcus I was seeing a therapist. He said, "That's a good idea. I think it'll help with the family stuff." I found out later that he told his family I was in therapy because she can't handle normal family dynamics. Jessica knew, from our conversations, that something in the marriage wasn't sitting right. Not the big things. The day-to-day life with Marcus was functional and often genuinely good. But the Thornton family thread, and Marcus's consistent invalidation of my experience of it, had created a low-level dissonance in me that 9 years of friendship had taught Jessica to recognize. She asked me, once about 8 months before the screenshot arrived, "Has Marcus ever fully validated your experience with his family? Not mediated it, not explained it, actually said, "Yes, I can see how that landed. I'm sorry?" I thought about it. I said, "Not exactly," she said. "Okay." She did not say more, she stored it. Jessica found out about the chat from a mutual acquaintance. A woman named Trish, who had been at a dinner party hosted by Marcus's sister Diane, where Marcus had apparently been on his phone at some point in the evening, and Trish, who was sitting beside him, had seen a notification from the Thornton's thread and had caught a fragment of what it said. Trish was not a close friend of Jessica's, but she was a person with a conscience who knew that Jessica and I were best friends. And she called Jessica the following Monday and described what she had seen. Jessica called me immediately. She said, "Leah, I need to tell you something and I need you to let me finish before you respond." I said, "Okay." She told me what Trish had described. A notification from a group chat called the Thorntons. The fragment Trish had seen before Marcus locked his phone. Something about me. Something Trish described as unkind. Something that referenced a conversation Marcus had clearly been having with his family about our marriage. It was a Sunday morning in March. Marcus had gotten up early. He was a runner. Weekend mornings were his long run days, an hour and a half minimum. And he had come back, showered, and left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went back to the bedroom to get dressed. I was in the kitchen making coffee. His phone was face up. A notification appeared, a message in the Thorntons. I picked up the phone. This is the moment where some people will say I should not have. That private conversations are private. That picking up someone else's phone is a violation regardless of what you find. I have thought about this. My conclusion is a person who has been told, repeatedly and over years, that their own perception of their reality is wrong has a particular relationship with available evidence. I had been told I was imagining things. I had been told the Thornton family was simply reserved. I had been told the stalking was an oversight and the group text was a technology failure and Diane's redirections were not about me. I had been told, by the person I trusted most, that my sense of what was happening was incorrect. The phone was unlocked. The notification was there. I opened the chat. The history loaded. Hundreds of messages. The earliest ones visible in the initial load were from 8 months ago. I scrolled back as far as the loaded history would take. Then I stood at the kitchen counter and I read. I read for 27 minutes. I know the precise time because I checked the clock when I started and when I stopped. The way I check the clock at the beginning and end of a particularly significant audit meeting. The habit of a person for whom time and documentation are professional instincts. I read everything the loaded history contained. I took screenshots. 30 of them captured systematically, organized in chronological order in my Photos app before I put the phone back on the counter in exactly the position I had found it. Then I poured my coffee. I went to the kitchen table. I sat down. I opened the photos on my own phone. I read through the 31 screenshots twice. The first time I was looking for the full picture. The second time I was looking for specific things. Dates, contexts, the relationship between what had been said in the chat and what had been happening in my marriage at the corresponding time. The chat went back 26 months. It had begun, as far as I could determine from the loaded history, approximately 3 months into our marriage. The earliest message I could see, the one that marked what appeared to be the beginning of the conversation, about me specifically, was from Ruth. It said, "I just want to say I am trying with her, but she is very difficult to be in a room with. There is something prickly about her that I don't think is going to change." Marcus had responded, "I see it too. I just keep hoping she'll relax into the family more. I know, I see it too. My husband." 3 months into our marriage, agreeing with his mother's characterization of me as prickly and difficult in a private thread that he had never mentioned existed. I am going to tell you what was in the chat. Not everything. 26 months of a family thread contains a great deal of content, much of it unrelated to me, but the content that was about me, because you deserve to know exactly what I found, and because I think the specific nature of the betrayal matters. Not just that it happened, but what it looked like in the specific language of it. Ruth described me, across multiple messages spanning the 26 months, as difficult, prickly, controlling, never quite warm, not the kind of woman I pictured for Marcus, and in one message that I have thought about more than any other. The kind of person who will always be working on something to be offended by. Diane contributed. She makes every gathering about whether she's being included enough. It's exhausting. And, Marcus, you are such a good husband to her, and I just don't think she appreciates how patient you are. Karen was quieter in the thread. She contributed, I'm trying. And, once, in response to something Ruth had said about me. Honestly, yeah. Which is its own kind of participation. And Marcus contributed to this chat 37 times across the 26 months. 37 messages about me, in a thread with his mother and his sisters, across 2 years of marriage. Not all of them were negative. Some were defensive of me in a mild way. She's going through a hard time at work, or she's just an anxious person. It's not about you guys. The majority were not defensive. I know she can be a lot. I'm working on it, he said in response to his mother saying I was never quite warm. She tries, she just doesn't always land it. After a Thornton family Thanksgiving that I had found particularly difficult, she had a rough night. She's been in her head about you all lately. I don't know how to make her relax. She's been in her head about you all lately. My wife's been struggling with feeling unwelcome. I've noticed the gathering is hard for her and I want to address it. In her head about you all. My legitimate experience of their coldness, reframed as my psychological problem, in a chat with the people creating it. And then there were the private disclosures. The things I had told him in trust. The childhood material, the professional exhaustion, the former relationship and its damage. Each one appeared in the chat in altered form, reshaped into evidence, too damaged, too difficult for Marcus to manage. I want to tell you what I did not feel reading those 31 screenshots, because I think it matters. I did not feel the kind of devastation that I might have expected, the collapse, the tears, the sense of the floor dropping out. What I felt was something cleaner and colder than devastation. I felt confirmed. I felt every instinct I had silenced, every perception I had allowed to be reframed as oversensitivity, every feeling I had been told was my problem. I felt all of it return to me, legitimized, documented, no longer arguable. I had not been imagining things, I had been right. And the person who told me I was wrong was the person who knew I was right and was telling the truth of it somewhere else. Those 4 days were among the more interesting professional experiences of my own psychology. I continued to function. I went to work, I did my job, I had dinner with Marcus each evening, I slept in the same bed. I did not pretend warmth I was not feeling. But I also did not perform coldness that would have signaled that something was wrong before I was ready. I was, in those 4 days, a woman in full possession of a very significant piece of information who had decided deliberately when and how to use it. I called Jessica on day 2 and told her what I had found. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" I told her. She said, "Do you want me there?" I said not for the conversation, but I might need her after. She said, I'll be available. I called Dr. Webb and asked for an emergency session on day 3. I needed to think through what I was going to say and how I was going to say it, and I needed to do it with someone who could help me maintain the specificity I wanted to bring to conversation. Clear, accurate, not cruel. I did not want to devastate Marcus. I wanted to confront him with the truth and give him the opportunity to respond. The devastation would be in the truth itself, not in how I delivered it. On day 4, a Thursday evening, after dinner, after the dishes were done and the apartment was quiet, I sat down at the kitchen table and I put my phone in front of me and I looked at Marcus across the table and I said, I need to show you something and I need you to look at it before you say anything. He looked at my face. He said, okay. I put my phone on the table between us. The screenshots were open. The first one was Ruth's message. Earliest one I had. I just want to trying with her, but she is very difficult to be in a room with. And below it, Marcus's response. I see it too. He read it. I watched his face. He read it with the specific quality of someone who recognizes what they are looking at immediately and is trying, in real time, to determine whether denial is available to them. He was doing the calculation I have watched clients do in audits. Is there a version of this I can explain differently? Is there a counter-narrative available? The screenshot was his message, in his words, with his name on it. He said, where did you get this? I said, doesn't matter where I got it. I have 31 screenshots spanning 26 months. I've read all of them. I know what's in them, he said. I said, I want you to look at all of them before you say anything. I want you to see the full record, and then I want you to tell me the truth. I handed him my phone. I watched him scroll through 31 screenshots. It took him 11 minutes. He did not look up once. When he finished, he put the phone down on the table. He looked at the table, and then he looked at me. I had decided before confrontation that I was going to give Marcus a choice. Not an ultimatum in the conventional sense, not choose me or your family. What I was going to give him, something more specific and more honest than that. When he said he didn't know what to say, I let the silence sit for a moment. And then I said, I'm going to tell you what I need. I need you to answer one question honestly. Not the question of whether you love me. I believe you do, in whatever way is available to you. The question I need answered is this: were you ever, in 3 years of marriage, genuinely on my side with your family? Not performing being on my side, actually on my side. He looked at the table. He said, I tried to be. I said, that's not the same thing. I know. There was a long silence. Then he said, my mother. My mother is someone I have spent my whole life trying to make happy and failing at. And somewhere in there I learned that it was easier to manage the people around her than to manage her. It was easier to tell you it wasn't that bad than to tell her to stop. It was easier to share some of what you told me with the chat, because then I was giving her something, and maybe she'd be easier. I know how that sounds. I said, it sounds like you use my private disclosures to manage your relationship with your mother at the expense of your marriage. I said, Marcus, I need you to make a choice. Not today, not right this minute, because this is not a decision that should be made in the heat of a hard conversation. I need you to take some time, and I need you to answer me, honestly and specifically. Are you capable of being my husband instead of your mother's son? Not instead of her child, I don't want that. Instead of the person who manages her comfort by sacrificing mine. Are you capable of that? Because that is what this marriage requires if it is going to continue. He said, I want to be. I said, I know you do. That's not enough anymore. I need to know if you are capable of it. And I need you to think about that seriously before you answer. because my answer about what comes next depends on your answer. And I am not going to accept an answer that is performed. I have been living with performed answers for 3 years. Marcus went to stay with a friend for a week. His choice, not mine. He said he needed to think without the proximity of the situation, and I accepted that. I used the week to talk to Dr. Webb twice more, to have dinner with Jessica, and to be very honest with myself about what I actually wanted the outcome to be. What I wanted was a marriage. Specifically, the marriage I had thought I was in. One where my husband was genuinely on my side, where my perception of reality was trusted rather than systematically undermined, where the private things I shared in trust were held with care. I wanted that marriage. Whether Marcus was capable of being the person that marriage required was the question I had put to him, and I was waiting for the answer. He came back after a week. He asked to talk. We sat at the kitchen table again. He said, "I talked to my mother." I said, "What did you tell her?" He said that I had been wrong, that I had been managing the situation between her and you in a way that was wrong for you, and that I was going to stop. I told her if she wanted a relationship with me going forward, she needed to give you a genuine chance, not a managed one. And I told her that what had been happening in the chat was not something I was going to participating in. I said, "How did she respond?" He said, "She was upset. She said I was choosing you over my family. I told her choosing my wife was not the same as choosing against my family." We left it there. I looked at him for a long moment. That was the right thing to do. He said I should have done it a long time ago. I should have said that from the beginning. I know that. I am sorry, Leah. I am specifically and genuinely sorry for the things I shared in that chat, and for telling you that you were imagining things when you were not. That was a betrayal, and I know that it was a betrayal, and I don't expect you to be okay with it quickly. The 6 months after the confrontation were the hardest and most honest months of my marriage. Marcus started seeing a therapist individually, a decision he made himself without me asking, which I took as the most significant early indicator that the conversation in the kitchen had reached something real in him. He stopped sharing information about our marriage with his family. When his mother called, and she called frequently in the first few weeks, testing the boundary he had set, he maintained it. He did not perform the boundary for me, he actually held it. The Thornton family dynamics did not transform overnight. Ruth was cold to me for several more months, a different kind of cold than before, less managed and more genuine, which was in its own way more honest and therefore easier to be in a room with. Diane was cautious. Karen said, at a family dinner about 4 months after the confrontation, something that cost her something. "Leah, I owe you an apology. I participated in something I shouldn't have." She did not elaborate. She didn't need to. I said, "Thank you for saying that." And I meant it. Marcus and I are still married. I want to be clear about that, because this story does not have a clean ending in either direction, neither the triumph of everything fixed, nor the clarity of walking away. We are married, and we are working, and the marriage we have now is more honest than the one we had before the screenshots. Because the marriage we had before the screenshots built partly on a false record that I did not know was false. I still see Webb. Marcus still sees his therapist. We have had conversations in those sessions and outside them that I could not have predicted inside first 3 years of our marriage. Conversations where Marcus says, without being prompted, "I hear you," and means it. He is not a changed person. He is a person who is doing the work of becoming more consistently the person he was performing. Whether those two things fully converge is something I am watching with clear eyes. And without the generous interpretation that allowed things to go on as long as they did. Jessica comes for dinner once a month. She is civil to Marcus in the way of someone who has decided that civility is best available option while the jury is still out. He knows she has the receipts. He behaves accordingly. I am 33 years old. I am a CPA in Dallas. I find discrepancies for a living. I build accurate records of what actually happened so that no one can later claim it happened differently. What I keep from this story is the specific education of understanding that the most important records to maintain are not professional ones. The most important records are the ones inside your own person. The log of what you actually experienced, what you actually felt, what your own instincts told you before someone you trusted told you otherwise. I allowed 3 years of my own accurate record to be overwritten by a false one provided by the person who had the most to lose from my accuracy. I will not allow that again. Not from Marcus. Not from anyone. I also keep this. The moment I opened those screenshots and read them the first time and felt, underneath the betrayal and the grief and the cold, specific anger, felt confirmed. Felt the return of my own perception to my own possession. That feeling, the feeling of your own truth coming back to you, documented and undeniable. That is mine now. It was always mine, I just had to find it in a phone on a Sunday morning in March. He told me I was imagining things. He was documenting the things he told me I was imagining. I found the documentation, and I kept it. If you stayed till the end, thank you.